Kia ora, this is John Winters, Supermarket Sleuth, talking to you once more from New Zealand. And what are we looking at this week? Well, we're concentrating mainly on New Zealand and Australia with a brief reference to the UK. So we start with New Zealand. The government's currently discussing a container return scheme. It has discovered there are 2.3 billion beverage containers consumed annually in New Zealand, including plastic and glass bottles, cans and liquid paperboard containers. Container deposit schemes are common in South Africa and also in New South Wales and Australia. It's interesting that no other state in Australia has followed their lead, and they've been doing it for some time. We know the advantages are to reduce empty plastic and glass bottles and cans in curbside collections, but there's a strong anti-lobby group made up of retailers like supermarkets and dairies, which would be of course the recipients of the empty containers. They'd receive the containers, refund the 10 cents to customers, and then also have to keep bins to be collected and emptied by recycling companies. For them it would mean the hassle of keeping a bin at checkouts needing to be regularly emptied. Great inconvenience with no benefit to them. So that'll be a tough nut to crack with the government, but if the government's determined, they have the power, so they can overrule the supermarkets. So we'll just have to wait and see. Now we'll move on to mixed messages, and this relates to fresh produce. The fresh produce industry through PMAA New Zealand, which covers both Australia and New Zealand, is complaining that shoppers are being misled on social media and in other places by warnings about buying fresh produce from supermarkets. It's backing the message from the WHO, the World Health Organization, that fresh produce is safe and eating fruit and vegetables is encouraged during this time. Of course, fruit and vegetables are good for you and should be encouraged. They're also saying that food authorities globally are advising that food isn't a vehicle for transmitting the virus. So does that give you complete confidence that you can pick up that apple at home that you just bought from the supermarket and give it a quick rinse under the cold tap and enjoy? I have my doubts. I still prefer to wash mine with washing up liquid under warm water for 30 seconds and then rinse it off with cold water. Doesn't affect the taste at all, but I feel a lot more confident. Only recently, Jerry Prendergast, who's president of United Fresh in this country, advised that it was a good idea to wash loose fresh fruit and vegetables in detergent and warm water and then rinse in cold water before eating or cooking. And on top of that, I asked the supermarket produce department manager, who spends most of his time among the fruit and vegetable displays, what he thought of this advice. The same as Jerry. If it gives you more confidence, why not? And the produce manager, he's in his department all the time, and not only he, but I've seen customers pick up fruit, vegetable, look at it, decide they don't like it, put it down, pick up another one, and that doesn't give me any faith in the fact that that piece of fruit or vegetable that person's picked up and put down again is okay. So if I were you, I'd just take the safe route. Now we move to an interesting development as a result of the disappearance of many flights across the world. And in New Zealand, Air New Zealand is really hardly flying internationally and only using doing domestic flights. And so the people impacted by this, not so much domestic because they don't do it on domestic, but on international flights, are the companies who are supplying the food. And so one of them has come up with quite a brainwave. One such caterer is LSG Sky Chefs, which is based near Auckland Airport, Auckland International, well, it's both international and domestic airport, which has linked forces with participating New World and Pack and Save supermarkets in the North Island of New Zealand to provide ready-to-microwave meals. There are 6 meals on offer, which are made fresh daily at LSG Sky Chefs facilities in South Auckland and include 5 meat options and 1 vegetarian. LSG says their now in-flight meals, brought down from 35,000 feet, but more convenient, affordable and healthy meals. Both their classic and premium ranges are $10 and under. Ready to microwave, they can be found in supermarkets' chilled deli sections. The meals are said to be ideal for people living alone or for families. Let's hope they've a marked improvement on some of the meals I've had at 35,000 feet. Now we move to Australia, and a report on a consumer sentiment study by Shopper Media revealing how people have changed the way they shop since the lockdown took over our lives. This was an online survey of 11,390 Australian consumers nationally, with fieldwork conducted in 3 parts across the 24th to the 27th of April. 60% of Australians have opted for more supermarket home brands in place of their usual brand choices. 45% of Australian shoppers are showing they may be looking at prices more than in the past, with increased visits to Aldi in search of cheaper brands. There's still a high level of loyalty, with 64% of shoppers admitting to regularly visiting at least 2 supermarkets to buy the branded products they would normally choose. Price remains the most important consideration when buying FMCG goods, followed by the brands they trust and well-known brands. Some categories are more susceptible to switching when favourite or popular brands are out of stock, such as soft drinks and water, fruit and vegetables, for example tinned or packaged of those, and bread and cereals. Now, Nielsen HomeScan research has shown that consumers are stocking a healthy store of produce items, both shelf and fridge friendly as well. In the 4 weeks ending March the 22nd, overall growth of the fresh produce category reached a 2-year high, up 0.1% in volume sold compared to the same period a year ago. This marks a break in trend from recent months, where fresh produce had experienced generally flat sales growth. During the same period in March, many retailers withdrew promotional activity to manage demand. Also, consumers faced higher average prices due to supply chain challenges lingering from the bushfires and droughts they had in Australia. With those factors taken into account, the increase in fresh produce sales during March is well above expectations. Sales of fresh produce are also heavily supported by online shopping. Dollar sales for fresh produce sold online increased 37.2% in the 4 weeks to February the 22nd compared to a year ago, and that's in the lead up to a lockdown, of course. But due to mass demand, supply chains were pushed to the limit. As a result, the e-commerce sales trend for fresh produce fell to 9.5% in the following 4-week period ending March the 22nd. With more time at home and less desire to frequent stores due to the risk of COVID-19 exposure, Australians are shopping for produce differently than has been seen in the past. Similar to consumers in North America, the latest data highlights that Australians are stocking up on fruit and vegetables that have a longer shelf life, and in some cases seeking produce options that are more cost effective, such as canned or frozen fruit and vegetables. In the month of March, both shelf-stable and frozen produce saw unprecedented sales growth. In the fresh vegetable category, the primary growth drivers were all vegetables that are known to last in consumers' pantries and fridge drawers. In fact, while volume sales for fresh vegetables increased by 15% in the latest 4 weeks, it was potatoes, carrots and onions, all vegetables that store well, which contributed the most sales growth to the category. In a time when health is top of mind and home snacking is at an all-time high, fresh fruit volume sales actually declined in March. Bananas, apples and stone fruit recorded volume growth, while traditional lunchbox and snackable varieties, including berries, avocados and citrus, all declined compared to a year ago. It's clear, says Nielsen, that Australians are gravitating towards produce that can last weeks, not days. In the 4 weeks to March the 22nd, frozen fruit recorded an all-time high for volume growth, which was an increase of almost 40%, while canned fruit sales also jumped by 73.9%. Given that the average price of fruit was 7.9% higher than the same time a year ago, budgetary constraints may have influenced stronger frozen and canned fruit sales as well. The same pattern could be seen for vegetables, with frozen sales up by almost 60%, while canned vegetables increased by 118.5%. Now that's huge. Now we'll end this week with a quick dash to the UK. For the first time, Sainsbury's has started expanding its rapid bike delivery service, known as Chop Chop, to stores outside London. It's being rolled out to 50 outlets in 20 cities. Once completed, around 3.2 million households will be able to get Sainsbury's groceries by Chop Chop within an hour. Sainsbury's said the service will give customers who are self-isolating or less able to travel to stores another way to get supplies. Using a special app, customers can order up to 20 items from a range of around 3,000 essential grocery and household goods. Chop Chop was launched across London in April. The service has been launched in Brighton and Bristol last week, with Manchester, Reading, Richmond, Morden, Charlton and Harringay in Greater London following this week. And Chop Chop reminds me of one of those cycle transport means they have in parts of Asia, but this is very much in London. Well, that's it for this week. Shorter than normal, so you don't get too bored with it. And you can catch me on YouTube as Supermarket Sleuth, and contact me through Supermarket Sleuth Magic Talk New Zealand on Facebook. You can also hear me live at 10:45 a.m. on Saturdays New Zealand time on Weekend Life by going to magic.co.nz and click on Talk at the top of the page. Bye for now.